The Honda Ridgeline is a very popular truck in the US market for one reason only. This vehicle might look like a truck, but its handling and driving characteristics are quite similar to a normal car. Buyers simply love this vehicle because of this. However, every model has some problems that ruin its reliability, and knowing them is one of the best things you can do if you want to purchase a used or new Honda Ridgeline. So if you want to learn more, stay with us while we learn what in the world is going on with the Honda Ridgeline. Engine failures. Now let's start our list with one of the biggest problems that the Honda Ridgeline had during its lifespan, and that is the engine failures. This was a big problem for the 2006 to 2007 models. What happened was the fact that these engines did not last for a very long time. The cylinder number 4 decided to take a break from work and caused the engine to fail. These were catastrophic failures that occurred often in the first model years of the Honda Ridgeline. The problem was reportedly due to the fact that the head gasket was of low quality, so it warped and allowed coolant to enter the cylinder 4, and it also caused the engine to lose compression in the process. When this problem occurs, it'll require a complete engine rebuild or a new short block. A short block is basically the bottom portion of the engine that includes the block, crankshaft, and pistons. This can cost a few $1,000s to fix. This is why we recommend that you avoid these old Honda Ridgeline models. This problem is very unpredictable when it will happen. It might appear relatively early, but it can also appear in the late stages of the engine's life. So we advise that you avoid the 2006 to 2007 model years if you don't want to deal with these issues. Excessive oil consumption. Another common engine problem that the Honda Ridgeline has is excessive oil consumption. This is a big problem that can happen to an engine. Every engine tends to drink a certain amount of oil every 1,000 miles. It's simply impossible for the piston rings to seal perfectly. But when this oil consumption becomes excessive, it becomes a problem. So what is excessive oil consumption? Well, this is the case when the engine consumes a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. The owner needs to constantly top off the oil in order not to have the engine starve. Oil starvation can lead to engine failure because the lack of lubrication will create heat and friction. This will eventually seize the engine. This problem is fairly common even on some of the most recent Honda Ridgeline models. This is why we advise that you avoid vehicles that have 150,000 miles or more. Another indication is the black smoke from the tailpipe. Press on the gas, and if there's a cloud of smoke in the rear, you know that this is a serious oil consumer. Also, if there's a big oil jug somewhere around, this is a big red flag that you should notice. This problem can lead to excessive repair costs. It's highly likely that you will need a new short block, or if you decide, you can rebuild the existing block for cheaper, but we recommend going for the new route. This way, you'll spend a bit more but will be completely carefree in the next 200,000 miles or so. Engine misfires. Now let's discuss another common engine problem with the Honda Ridgeline, and that is the engine misfire issues. So what is an engine misfire? Well, this is a situation when the engine starts to work extremely rough and very often will show a check engine light. The spark plugs and ignition coils on these engines tend to go away quite often compared to other vehicles out there. The spark plug, for those who don't know, creates a spark, while the coil sits on top of the spark plug. This component acts as an electric transformer that transforms the 12-volt power from the battery into a high current that is then transferred to the spark plug. In many cases, these coils tend to fail because they're made cheaply. Whenever they fail, they start to create problems. So if you have a check engine light with a misfire, it's advisable to replace the affected spark plug or coil in order to solve the problem. Overall, this is not a huge issue compared to the previous two that we covered, but it is a common problem that can appear here and there and ruin your mood. Timing belt tensioner failure. Another very common problem with the 3.5-liter V6 engine that the Honda Ridgeline has had since its inception is the timing belt tensioner failure. So what is a timing belt tensioner? This is a small component mounted on the engine, specifically on the timing system. This is a hydraulic tensioner that keeps tension on the timing belt, so the engine is synchronized and has proper timing. This tensioner, since it's hydraulic, can leak, and whenever this happens, there will be a loss of tension on the timing belt. This loss of tension will cause the belt to be loose, and engine misfires and other problems will appear. This isn't something that an owner can ignore because if the belt jumps for a couple of teeth, it could result in bent valves. In this case, the engine will seize and a valve job will be needed. This can be pretty pricey, so as a precaution, whenever you purchase a used Honda Ridgeline, Replacing the timing belt at its tensioner is a good idea. You can't really trust old timing belts. Transmission problems. Another very common problem with the first generation Honda Ridgeline is the transmission cooler failure. On the automatic transmission in this model, there's an external cooler that is there to cool down the transmission. What happens is the fact that this cooler fails very often and allows coolant to enter the transmission. This results in catastrophic transmission failure. The solution to this problem is to replace the transmission and cooler with new upgraded units. This can cost $4,000 to do. So this is why we advise to avoid these early models. Even if you get one, make sure that the transmission cooler is upgraded and the lines are also replaced. This will save you a bunch of headaches because you don't want to replace the whole transmission for such a simple issue. Paint peeling or fading. Next on the list of issues with the Honda Ridgeline is the paint peeling or fading problem that is very common, especially on the first generation Ridgeline. This is an issue that plagues all of the Japanese car makers from this era, and this issue is reportedly due to cutting costs and using low quality clear coats. The clear coat gets UV damaged after a couple of years of sitting in the elements, and the paint starts to fade rather quickly. When this situation occurs, the vehicle will require a complete paint job because it's impossible to paint over damaged paint. The car has to be sanded down, and then a new layer of primer, base coat, and clear coat will be applied. This can cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars. This is why we advise that you stay away from these vehicles unless you want to pay a whole fortune for a paint job. Buying a garage model that has been well taken care of is a better idea than purchasing a model that was exposed to the elements. Fuel pump failures. Fuel pump failures are also quite common problems with the Honda Ridgeline. This model has a history of fuel pump issues. The fuel pump fails all of a sudden and the vehicle stalls. Specifically, the model years 2017 to 2019 suffer from this problem the most. There was a recall by Honda for over 100,000 Honda Ridgeline models where Honda decided to replace the fuel pump completely free. If you want to purchase a used Ridgeline from this era, make sure that the vehicle is recalled. If not, visit the nearest dealership to get the fuel pump replaced for free. Battery drain. The Honda Ridgeline is known for its parasitic drains that drain the battery and leave it with zero power even after a couple of days. This is very sad because it's frustrating for the owner, so it's a good idea to have a charger if you're not driving your Honda Ridgeline for a few weeks or even months. Starting it up can be impossible without getting it hooked to a different car or replacing the battery. Infotainment system glitches. We also have to add the problems with the infotainment. The infotainment of the Honda Ridgeline is not one of the best in the world. Honda infotainment is one of the worst in the industry. The system glitches and freezes. You need to restart the car in order to bring it back to normal, and this is rather frustrating for the owner. This is a common issue, especially in early Honda Ridgeline models from the second generation. The newer Ridgeline models are pretty much bulletproofed from these issues. That's why, if you want to get a model with a decent infotainment system, we recommend choosing the latest Honda Ridgeline model.